Hey, greetings everybody. It is GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft coming at you. So we left off with a two-part videos about basically setting up some of the last areas of the Eastern Kingdoms, the Syrian Gorge, the Burning Steppes, Ragnaros, setting up the first raid boss in Classic, and the state of the dwarves, essentially how they are today. And now we're on to the liberation of Kezan. I say this is Kezan. I'm going to say Kezan, but who the heck? Kezan? Maybe Kezan. Which is the land of the goblins. This is 100 years before the Dark Portal. Oh man, we're getting close. This is also interesting. If we've already seen one strong incident of the history presented in the War of the Ancients decidedly at odds with what they've stated in this book. And this is a potential other area because in the War of the Ancients, goblins were a part of that, helping Deathwing out. Let's see. Stay a while and listen to this potential world-breaking scenario. After the Sundering, the Zandalari set out to explore the numerous islands that dotted the newly formed sea between Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. It was during these voyages that the trolls discovered Kezan, an isle Kezan, an isle inhabited by goblins. These small green-skinned beings were clever but crude. At first, the two races kept their distance from each other. The Zandalari had come to Kezan in search of a strange mineral called Kajamite. The consumption of vaporized Kajamite caused a range of effects such as heightened senses, hallucinations, and increased intelligence. All of that is going on in Cataclysm. If you do the starting Goblin zone, you deal with the Kajamite and the island and everything. It's actually a cool starting one. The trolls greatly valued the mineral and saw it as a sacred component in their rituals and ceremonies. For centuries, they mined from the numerous Kajamite veins running close to the surface of the island. Occasionally, they employed goblins to work for them, paying with shiny but cheap trinkets that the small creatures prized. Okay, so we're establishing that the goblins have been around for a while, even though we've never mentioned them. And in a way, they're kind of like offshoots of trolls, and even in the way they look, I could see that. They're like pygmy trolls. The arrangement changed once the trolls discovered an unimaginable deposit of Kajamite buried deep underground, more than the Zandalari would ever need. Rather than dig for it themselves, they enslaved the goblins and forced them to mine under abysmal conditions. For thousands of years, the goblins suffered under the yoke of troll oppression, too weak to resist. In the end, it was the Kajamite itself that led to the goblins' salvation. A cloud of Kajamite dust always blanketed the mines. Over time, breathing it in awakened the goblins' intelligence and craftiness. Secretly, they plotted to the overthrow of their slave masters using what materials they could find to fashion traps, explosives, and other ingenious weaponry. The troll overseers were caught off guard when the goblin masses stormed from the mines, armed with technology beyond even what the Zandalari possessed. The revolution shattered the trolls' hold over Kezan, laying waste to their mining operation and leaving behind untold destruction. So they're like juiced up. But now it's like part of them as a race. So it's like even the babies that they made at this point forward, it evolved them. Goblins is ever since Warcraft 2, the first time you have goblins involved. Oh man, they're great. They're a great race. Good ad. The surviving Zandalari fled, and the goblins celebrated their new liberation by turning on each other in a mad scramble to fill the void of power. Amid the chaos, countless factions and allegiances formed. The most powerful of these groups were known as cartels. When no clear winner emerged from the fighting, these cartels brokered an uneasy truce. Conflict would never really end between the various goblin factions, but for decades they waged most of their battles in the economic arena. The cartels ultimately turned to trade to sustain themselves and used their profits to amass ever more wealth and power. And that's basically the state of the goblins now. They operate in these little cartels. They have trade lords. Their leader is just the strongest cartel guy, and that's just part part of their charm, I guess you want to call it. Ancient goblins. In ancient times, Keeper Mimiron had discovered Kajamite and used it to experiment on various races, greatly enhancing their intellect. Some of these test subjects were members of a small, primitive race that roamed the forest lands near Ulduar. Consuming Kajamite transformed the creatures into a highly intelligent, industrious breed known thereafter as goblins. The destruction caused by the Sundering cut off the goblin supply of Kajamite. In just a few generations, their heightened intellect vanished. Those goblins who had found refuge on the Isle of Kezan had already forgotten the role Kajamite had played in their old society. Okay, so this is on the last page. I was already saying, okay, well, did it awaken something inside them as they're claiming, or is it just the side effect of their exposure to Kajamite? Well, if a keeper has essentially taken this tiny race of people and changed them into goblins using Kajamite, then you could say, okay, yes, they have this latent part in them. But also, within a few generations, when they have no Kajamite, they're no longer intelligent. So one could make the argument that the goblins without Kajamite are not who they are. Has their exposure been long enough now to where it's intrinsic? Yeah, so it seems, again, we've done this a couple times. We're doing a little bit of hand waving by tying the goblins' race, their personality, into the exposure to Kajamite. It's a slippery slope. It can be fun. It leaves a lot of doors open. But we're 100 years away from the Dark Portal, and we have almost every race taken care of now. Another episode in Pipes 5x5. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.